Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I'm also a doctoral student of psychology. Today, let's go over the difference between borderline personality disorder and fearful avoidant attachment style, okay? So, let's first talk about the definitions because that is the first difference, right? Borderline personality disorder, BPD, is a clinical diagnosis and it requires extensive evaluation. It is a very serious diagnosis. I take it very seriously and I don't casually assign this, okay? This is something that goes into somebody's medical file, and it's very important that this is done properly and it is diagnosed and assessed very extensively, okay? Attachment styles, however, do not go in your medical file. It is not a diagnosis. It is independent from personality disorders, but that also means that they can overlap. It means that you can have both. You can have fearful avoidant attachment style and borderline personality disorder. A lot of patients that I have that I work with, they have borderline, which I have evaluated, and they may also have fearful avoidant attachment. I've also seen anxious attachment, pretty common with borderline. If anything, that one's more common, to be honest. But they can coexist. You can have borderline and not have fearful avoidant. You can have fearful avoidant attachment style, and if you don't have borderline, right? And so that's the very first difference, that actual definition, okay? One is a clinical diagnosis, one is attachment style. They are independent and they can also overlap, okay? The next one is the mood regulation, okay? Borderline personality disorder. They typically have intense mood swings, they're very impulsive, and they may struggle with that chronic emptiness, which is that they tend to chase. Because they're struggling with that chronic emptiness, they may actually they may struggle with impulsivity due to that, right? It can sometimes be to overlap and kind of readjust that chronic emptiness. So they're struggling with it, and so they may be impulsive. That intense mood swings may also occur because of that, and also the trauma that they very much experience. Now, for fearful avoidant attachment, there are intense moods as well, but what ends up happening is they're often suppressed or conflicted. And so what actually happens is they may come out in bursts due to the suppression, not because of the chronic emptiness or the feelings that triggered it. It's because that you've been bottling something up for a long time. That usually comes out. And that's common with anxious attachment as well, right? It's not because you're just having a mood swing because of something. It can, of course, but it is due to that continuous suppression. Whereas borderline personality disorder, it is sometimes not due to suppression. It can be emptiness. It can be a feeling. It can be that right away when you felt rejected, there's this mood swing that occurs. And that can happen with fearful avoidant as well, but it's more common where it's suppressed or you have that conflicting feeling, okay? The next one is how they react or their perspective of love and relationships, okay? So borderline personality disorder, this is so common. I have never, ever, ever had a borderline patient that does not do this, okay? It is the rapid shift of seeing their partner on a pedestal. So they idealize this person and then they devalue this person. It is extremely rapid. I have seen it within 50 minutes. I have seen it within a 45-minute session. I have seen it within a 60-minute session. I've seen it, right? Where it literally happens very, very fluctuating. It's not always that common. It's not always that quick, but it can go day to day. It can go week to week. And it's not always because of what the person does. It is, but it's a very skewed perspective of what that person does. So let's say this person, they put their plate on the side of the sink instead of in the sink. Now there's this devaluing, right? It's a very rapid shift. It can be for very specific things. It can be for things that are more abstract. It can be because this person coughed a certain way. It can be because of the fact that maybe they felt abandoned and they're feeling uncomfortable. It could be even more like how they breathe, right? And these types of behaviors is so shifting that you might see it happen within a conversation. It could be jealousy. Jealousy is a very common trigger, and that is also common with fearful avoidance, but it's actually more common with anxious. But you might see where a person with borderline, they may feel very uncomfortable with their partner having certain friends, and they have this very specific, they idealize this person. This person is so amazing. This person is so loving. Oh, now this person is hanging out with this person. I hate this person. I'm leaving. I don't like you anymore. You don't care about me. And they're starting to shift their perspective, very black and white. And then when that person says, okay, if you don't like me, let's take a break, now they go back to idealizing. It's very, very much cycling. It's very rapid. And this part is where a lot of people do confuse fearful avoidance, because fearful avoidance have a hot and cold as well. But the reason it's happening is a little bit different. The fearful avoidant wants closeness, but they pull away when it gets too risky, or depending on the person's mood and behavior. See, borderline is not the person's mood and behavior. It's how borderline is how they're perceiving what is right, what is ideal, how they feel, their perspective of their reality, right? And so they feel like you shouldn't have a friend like talking this way, or you shouldn't breed this way, or you shouldn't have an opposite sex friend. And so their perspective, you're ideal or you're not, right? They put you in certain boxes, which is that rapid shift. That's not the same with fearful avoidance. It can overlap, but with fearful avoidance, if their partner is pulling away, then they may feel like they want to chase them, or they may feel uncomfortable with the possibility of being abandoned. So they might actually pull away too. It really depends on which side they're more extreme. If they're more anxious, they chase their partner. If they're more avoidant and the partner is pulling away, then they start pulling away as well. And so it's based on their partner's behavior, because they're deep inside, they want closeness, but they're also feeling like closeness is risky. And so they are always hyper vigilant. How is their partner acting so that they react to their partner? It's very reactive oriented on their partner, which means if their partner is very consistent, that fearful avoidant is no longer hot and cold. It starts decreasing as they heal themselves. Borderline, it does not have to do with that. Borderline will start picking at something else now. And that's why it can be very challenging, right? With borderline also, with love and relationships, and this is also with mood regulation, emotional regulation. Borderline individuals, they may have a moment where they're literally very angry, and then they start crying in the next 5 minutes. I've seen it all the time. I have many patients who have borderline, and they are, very upset about something. They're angry, then they're crying, and then now they're happy. Now they're completely detached, and you see it within a very short span. It might be even within 15 minutes. Fearful avoidance don't really have that short span. I don't see it that often, okay? And it could be within relationships. It could be emotional regulation, okay? The next one is abandonment, how they perceive abandonment. Borderline individuals, very strong and persistent, very, very scared of abandonment. It may lead to very extreme behaviors. It may lead to self-harm, and I'm not going to talk much about that, but that is one of the more common ones, okay? It may lead to clinging to their partner. It may lead them to trying to actually physically make sure their partner doesn't leave. They may lock the door, hide the keys. They may try and do something to their car, maybe try and make sure their car doesn't work, hope the battery runs out so they leave the light on of the car, their partner's car. Let's say their partner stayed overnight. They might leave the light on so that in the morning the battery is dead and the partner can't leave. And I'm not saying this is a bad or good thing, by the way. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying these are behaviors I've literally seen. And they're very strong, very persistent, because they are terrified of abandonment. They're so scared. And that's deeply what they're so afraid of. And that these behaviors might be very extreme. That abandonment makes them feel very terrified. And they don't want to feel that way. They don't want to be abandoned. However, fearful avoidance, it is afraid of abandonment. But usually what happens when they're afraid to be abandoned, they withdraw or avoid. And then what happens is while they're withdrawing, or they feel ashamed that they're feeling this way, it bottles up. And then they tend to basically crash out, right? Because they feel rejection followed by shame and suppression. So you see a cycle where, let's say their partner's pulling away. So they might feel like, okay, I'm afraid I'm going to chase, or I'm going to pull away as well. And then that bottles up and they crash out. Then they get angry. Then they break up with you. And then after the breakup, that emotion is now released. And now they feel ashamed that they did that. They suppress it, but then they suppress the feelings of wanting you, and now they want you again. And so you're starting to see this entire cycle occur. And that is not the same thing with borderline individuals. Most fearful avoidants are not, they might, but they're not going to say, okay, you know what? My partner stayed the night and I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z to make sure they don't leave tomorrow. A person with borderline, they might do that. That is a much more extreme case, but it does happen, okay? And the very last one is self-image, which I will say is probably one of the more obvious differences, even though it's very hard to tell unless you're literally assessing them day to day. But it's actually the self-image, okay? Individuals with borderline personality disorder, they have a very unstable and a more distorted sense of self. They don't actually have a very solid sense of self. It changes. It's very unstable. They don't always know what they're doing. They have a lot of shame. They have a lot of, sometimes they have an inflation of their perspective. They might think they're X, Y, and Z, and it's really not as extreme as I think it is in a positive way, right? And so they may have some inflations. They may have some hatred and shame, whereas fearful avoidance, they typically, it's not distorted. They just typically they struggle with self-worth, but they don't have moments where they're feeling extremely inflated or they're feeling very positive about certain things. Or now they sometimes I've had borderline patients report, hey, I'm feeling like a brand new person. I want to do this today. And they just want to change everything. And they might go back around and do something different. They may want to change X, Y, and Z. And so their image is just changing sometimes or all the time. They may not know who they are. Whereas fearful avoidance, they just struggle with that self-worth. They don't like other people much. They don't trust other people, but they also don't trust themselves. That it's pretty stable when it comes to that. And unfortunately, excuse me, a lot of fearful avoidance don't realize how much their discomfort of themselves actually affects all their moods, which borderline, their self-image is not the reason that these moods are affected. Somewhat, but it's not. For fearful avoidance, if they're healing their self-worth, a lot of their other behaviors actually start to decrease. So this is just a very brief overview. I will probably make a more detailed one because I know this can be a little bit complicated and I can appreciate that. So I hope this video was helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.